Representative Jay Hughes, thanks for being with us on At Issue. First question, what is your education plan and how are you going to pay for it?
Great question. It's called 2020 Vision in 2020. It is something that was the result of a lot of work of a lot of current and former superintendents, stakeholders, teachers, teacher assistants, et cetera, that worked together for the last year. How are we going to pay for it? We've got the money in Jackson, we just have the wrong priorities. We'll cut out crony contracts. We'll do what needs to be done. We'll take the lottery proceeds and do the same thing that every other state in the United States did and use those toward education.
So what is you said Vision 2020, what are the nuts and bolts of it?
Nuts and bolts are this, more common sense, less Common Core, less standardized testing, switching over and getting a waiver from the federal government to allow us to switch to the ACT and work keys for high school graduates or people graduating so that we don't have those end of course exams tied to the graduation, which is unique only in Mississippi.
Do you know how much your proposals will cost, and will it cost more than what we're doing now?
Well, of course it would cost more because we are not fully funding the state-funded education plan, which is the Mississippi Adequate Education Program. There are many places that have been just pure waste or crony deals that contribute to that. I think of one in particular that they snuck in $1.5 million to a Weight Watchers franchise. They snuck in another $2.5 million to a lady just to hang $3,000 worth of posters. There's $1 million here, $1 million there. Sooner or later, you're talking about real money.
You mentioned MAEP, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program. Is that your goal, to fully fund that? Do you like that plan? Do you dislike it? What do you like and not like about it?
Well, that's been my goal since the day I was decided to run. I ran because of the underfunding of our public schools and the disrespect that lawmakers have for teachers. It's a great start, the MAEP. But it's not, we should never strive to just be adequate. And that is what our plan says, the Mississippi Adequate Education. Can you imagine if your favorite college team hired a coach and you said, all right, our goal this year is to be adequate? So it's a good start, but it does need some tweaking. We have the highest poverty rate in the United States and have ever since it's been counted, and it does cost more to educate students that are high poverty and high poverty school districts. It needs to take into consideration ELL. We don't do well enough with that in Mississippi, and it also needs to take into consideration the SPED formula, the special ed students. Those are things that when they were trying to do a rewrite a few years ago, I agreed with those things because it does matter. And if we properly fund it, then what we will have is the proper ABA therapist for autism in every school district. We'll have the dyslexia therapist. We'll have the needs for all students in our public schools so that they don't have to fall prey to those that are trying to get private vouchers to private companies.
Do you have plans to reduce the opportunity or achievement gap between low-income students and high-income students, white students and black students?
Well, I disagree that it's white students and black students. There's an achievement gap based on income. It may look just that it's a racial issue in certain school districts, but the reality is there's achievement gaps between those, the haves and the have-nots. I can speak more clearly about it than most because I'm in Oxford, and Oxford has the highest achievement gap in the state of Mississippi. I've taught in those schools, I've seen them, and everyone comes to school with a different set of baggage. Nobody knows what's been going on in that family. For some of them, these children might be the babysitter at home, they might be the victim of abuse at home, they might not have a parent at home. We do need to do something different than we're doing to close that achievement gap. One of the key things is making sure that all students, regardless of their district, have access to the same resources. Going back to my district, every single student in our district gets a Mac computer. I can go one district over and they've only got 23 computers that are old for 280 students. That contributes to a greater expansion of the achievement gap.
So what do you do about that?
You get the proper resources to all the schools. You fully fund MAEP. You stop paying so much to the unfunded mandates and the testing coordinators and this therapist and this counselor, and we get back to educating a child. We cut down on all of the testing, the standardized testing, the benchmark testing, the practice testing, and we let teachers teach because nobody knows those 30 children in that classroom, or 22, or 18, better than a quality teacher at the front of that school class.
You mentioned special needs students, special education students. The voucher program kind of came out of that, out of the legislature, of taking money for a family with a public school student can use that voucher to send that student to a privately funded institution, be it a school or whatever, where they feel that child's needs can be better addressed. Do you support that program?
Well, what I don't support is it's a ploy. So look, I was in special ed. I have nephews that are on the spectrum, and the simple reality is each state where these, what I call money grabbers of the school, they call the funds the actual last frontier. It's the biggest amount spent by every state. And they come in and they first do it for special needs children, because how could you vote against special needs children getting vouchers? Then they move to the urban and inner city where they have a high minority rate, and they say, we want to expand it to them. How could you vote against the little kids in the inner city? And then the third thing they do is they open it wide open. And that's been the exact plan, and we are following it lockstep. So do I support a special needs student getting the best possible education? Absolutely. But you're not going to get that just because someone owns a private for-profit school like the one that donates to my client, not my client, that donates to my opponent. Vouchers are about money, and that's what they see. I'm about the education of the child, and if we would quit sending money to public dollars to private schools, we could educate every child, special needs or not, in our public schools.
So you think if the public schools, as they are now, got enough money, they would have adequate resources to educate these children themselves?
So many do. So, yeah, the answer is yes. If they got the proper amount of resources, they could hire the proper personnel and provide the best education for every single child. Education is the greatest equalizer there is, public education. For someone like me that was born poor, that was the great equalizer that allowed me to do better and go farther and do things, and go from having a job to creating jobs in Mississippi. So early childhood education is proven, without a doubt, to be the greatest foundation you can give to a child. The mind is learning more at that time than it will for the rest of its life. Just like you and me forgetting things right now. But those little minds are amazing at that age, and I completely support and have co-sponsored bills for lowering the starting age to kindergarten instead of first grade each year that I've been in the legislature.
All of that would take more money. Do you believe that what you've proposed here already would provide the needed funding to make that happen?
Absolutely, and if it didn't, then we would find it elsewhere, because I believe in education more than corporate welfare. The reality is we're not bringing in businesses by tax cuts, and I'm a businessman, and I've benefited from these tax cuts. But what I want and what business wants and needs is an educated and qualified workforce. That's what attracts jobs. That's what attracts companies.
Should an education chairman have public education experience in your view?
Yes, because what an education chairman is governing and dealing with is public education. So I believe they should have that education background. I've been in public schools from every day from first grade through law school. And without a doubt, that chairman also needs to actually shadow teachers and substitute and understand what happens daily instead of just show up for photo shoots.
We've talked a lot about secondary education. Would you support an increase in state funding for all higher education, including community colleges and universities?
Yes, and you know, one thing that Governor Bryant and I also agreed on is a free first year for community colleges. We have so much to offer in our community college system, and the cost was only going to be between $7 and $8 million. What a game changer that would be. But every year we've been there, they're giving less and less funding to our universities and colleges, and it's starting to show. Many of these students don't stay all year, or if they do, they're not operating at a proficient English level, and it counts against that school district when it comes time to studies, when it comes time to testing, when it comes time to accountability models. So certain school districts like Hernando are doing a great job with ELL, and they have a number up there. But these districts that are underfunded, that don't have a tax base, are not able to adequately get these ELL students at the level they need to be operating, so it doesn't adversely impact the school district rating.
What plans do you have to address the shortage of teachers and principals in Mississippi schools?
Well, the biggest plan is to stop attacking them at the senior level of our leadership in Jackson. Quit passing bills that tell them how to do their job, period. We've got to show respect. We've got to make it the profession it always was. You know, I respected growing up my teachers as much as anyone else in the community. I mean, they open the minds and explore and create our next lawyers, doctors, workers, everything. So the first thing is give them respect. They need that. Quit doing bills to try to tell them what to do. Let them teach instead of manage standardized tests. They need to have they need to have simple things as much as this, and that is they need to have bathroom breaks that are assured to them every day. You know, they need their planning period. Some school districts took those away. Treat them with the same respect that you would want to be treated with. And our legislature has not been doing that for the last 8 years. I think our governor called them, as a matter of fact, our governor called our schools an abysmal failure.
You say give them more respect. Does that include higher salaries?
Absolutely it does. I'm just not going to make that as the one thing. I've filed for additional salaries to make them competitive for the last 4 years, every single year. Now, amazingly, those bills were killed every year until an election year, and then you had to fight to get to 1,500. What we don't have, it's not a shortage of teachers, it's a shortage of people that are paying student loan debts and have master's degrees that want to work for $35,000 a year. That's a problem.
Studies have shown that more and more jobs in the future are going to require a post-secondary diploma. For Mississippi to remain competitive in the global economy, how do you get more students into higher education, or at least post-secondary education?
Well, it's a trick question, because what we also need we need to make sure that those 70% of our graduates that are not going to college, not going to spend a day in them, that they have skill sets. So I'm a big fan. It used to be called VOTEC, and that's what I went to. Carpenter trades, building trades, and we're not doing that enough anymore. What we're doing is they're so focused on standardized tests and scores that Johnny and Jane don't know how to be a plumber or electrician or HVAC or whatever they want to. Those are needed. Those are always going to be needed, regardless of what happens with technology. And they earn great livings. I mean, I've had to call my plumber on a holiday weekend, and I can tell you that they do very well. So we need to focus on educating all students, not just focused on trying to get them into the college and post-secondary programs.
But how do you do that? How do you make sure that they know of all of these different career paths that they could take?
Well, for school districts that aren't underfunded, they do wonderful jobs of having job fairs, career fairs. They do a great one up in Tupelo. There's one on the coast. They take them on field trips and go to Raytheon and things like that. But the sad thing is the districts that need it the most are the ones with the least amount of money. And when you don't have that, it means you don't have field trips. But we get to every single district a vocational training component. So what we do is we get in every single district a vocational and skilled training operation going so that they can do it before they leave high school. Because for many students, regardless of theory, studies, or best wishes, once a child leaves high school, they don't come back. So you've got to get them to get that skill set before they graduate.
How do you see attaining a higher education affecting the broader context of economic development in Mississippi?
Well, just like Haley Barber said, that education is the greatest economic development tool we have, without a doubt. But I think what we've done is we've had leadership that's been so focused on a headline or having their face or name in a picture that they're not worried about the bigger picture. What we're trying to say is we want everyone to come to Mississippi. We want to attract them. But what the laws that we're passing say, because they're so focused on moral laws or social issues, that the sign says, "Welcome to Mississippi," kinda. And that does not make our youth come back or attract new jobs in industry.
Anything else you would like to say about education?
Well, Yeah, I think what's most important is why I believe in public education is that I'm a product of it, and I've been blessed enough to do well that I volunteer as a substitute teacher, and I donate my legislative salary back to my school district. I've done that before I ever decided to run for lieutenant governor. Even when I was an alderman in my hometown, I donated my alderman salary every year back to our schools.
Very good. All right, now let's move into health care. What are your thoughts on expanding Medicaid in Mississippi, and why?
Well, I was the very first one to come out and say that the Mississippi Hospital Association has a fantastic plan. It's not perfect, but it's called Mississippi Cares, and it would allow us to copy what Vice President Pence did in Indiana. It would bring $1 billion a year into Mississippi and create between 16 and 20,000 jobs. How can you be against that? You know, the reality is that every time that there's a new million or billion for this port or this building on a school or anything else coming from the federal government, it gets headlines and they hold a gold shovel. But they're offering us $1 billion to keep people from dying, and you won't take it.
Do you think that would be the magic bullet that would provide quality, affordable health care to all Mississippians?
Absolutely, and that be working Mississippians. These are 300,000 working poor people. So you're saving lives, you're improving the quality of life, there are going to be more hospitals. We've got 31 on the brink of going bankrupt right now. You know, rural health care is very important to me. It should be to everyone, because I recognize there are 82 counties, not just 4 or 5.
That was on the subject of rural hospitals. So many are closing or in danger of closing. Would the Mississippi Cares program, would that take care of these hospitals and keep more from closing?
Absolutely, it would. It would make a huge difference, and the Mississippi Hospital Administration Association understands that as well. You know, I tell the story often because it was so personal to me, deeply personal, that my mom died in the back of an ambulance going to a hospital that was just 3 miles too far. That was 10 years ago, but now I had one the other night where there was an ex-official that was in Neshoba County and fell and broke his hip. They could not get a room to get him into for surgery at any hospital in Jackson. That's a problem.
Let's move to infrastructure now. There's been a lot of talk about roads and bridges that are crumbling in Mississippi. First of all, how do you think that affects economic development in the state, and what plan do you have to do something about the infrastructure issues?
Well, infrastructure is the biggest impact on economic development that's holding it back, because you have to look at every major development project that the MDA has done. The very first thing they do, whether it's Nissan or Yokohama or Continental, they redo the roads going into it. It's a big deal. Closed roads and bridges, that means that you can't get 80,000-pound trucks of goods or materials to them. So that means you have isolated. That's an island. What I have done is I filed a bill 2 different times that would divert the sales tax ratio, the 18.5%, back to counties just like the cities all get already. And that would be used strictly for roads and bridges and infrastructure. Major deal. But the bill was killed.
Well, how would you make up for the cash then that would not be going to where it's going now?
Well, it would be, it's going to be a 3-way deal. You're going to have to divert money back to the county roads and bridges instead of, say, you raise your taxes in, say, Scott County. Mm-hmm. If you raise taxes 20 cents in one county, then you know those people are going to drive to the next county where it's cheaper. So that's not a real fix. It is going to take a combination of an increase in gas taxes that haven't been raised in over 30 years and an offset in a lower income tax. And again, it's going to take operating an efficient government, and there are so many amounts that are paid out that just go to crony deals.
What would you say distinguishes you from your opponent?
He is a good guy, I am a good guy. What distinguishes us are different lifetime experiences. I am more in touch with real issues, real people, real Mississippians because of having been born poor and to have to fight and scrap my way up. I've had successes, I've had failures, but at the end of the day, and I still have calluses, at the end of the day, my lifetime experiences give a different view of what we need in this state. I'm not out of touch, I'm in touch with it.
Jay Hughes, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you coming on.
Yes, sir. Have a good one.
You too.